Hi guys, welcome to webinar number 22. This is about saving spots versus missing spots. Um, to clarify what I mean by this is it's when are you avoiding a certain spot when you don't take it, or are you strategically deciding not to do a spot? I'm sure you've heard the cliche battle, the take everything that's plus EV, wait for a better spot. And so those two groups of thinking, it's like Democrat, Republican, right? And people argue to the death over this stuff. But really what we want to talk about is not falling into either one of those classes. We're not taking every plus EV spot, and we're not just waiting for a better spot. What we're doing is we're strategically analyzing situations and determining if a spot is worth it or not. And if it is, we'll take it. If we deem it's not worth it, we will quote unquote wait for a better spot. But it's much more in depth than that, because we're not just waiting for a better spot, we're anticipating better spots because we know what we're capable of as players. So we're not just waiting for something good to come along, like when PokerStars gives you a good situation and you think, oh, I waited, yay, and it's finally here. No, we're not waiting for a better spot. We're just anticipating better spots because we're searching for things that are better for us, that are lower risk, higher reward, etc., etc. So what I've done is I've taken three hands. These are from reviews with Wicked Souls. The first one I actually had to cheat a little bit and create it myself because I couldn't find the exact hand history, but this is essentially the same setup. But just to clarify, in this hand, this is a $2 180 man, three-handed final table. Wicked Souls is actually the hero in the real hand. So we're going to pretend that the big blind is hero here. So the button is not involved in, whoops, spoiler. The button is not involved in this hand at all. In this hand, the small blind is shoving 60K. I couldn't get the hand history to show that, so it kind of just looks like he goes away. But in the hand, the small blind shoves 60K. And before we go more in depth about anything like reads, what is your initial reaction to this? So small blind is shoving 60K. Snap fold. It's a fold. Okay. So pretty obviously all fold. I'm going to now give you some information. Okay, I'm going to see if I can tempt you here. What if you know that the small blind is on 100% of hands here, and for some reason this is just a fact? So we got a snap, a call, a fold, a still fold. Any other takers? Another still fold. We get a call. Okay. Anything else that you're considering? Tell me what you're considering here, which leads you to your decision. And we will jot some things down. Okay, let's go through some of these. We still have 40K left if we lose. Stack situation. There is no mega third place guy. Puyon, does that make you want to call or fold? Tim wanted to call. If he's shoving 100 now, he'll shove 100 later. Fluffy Killer's saying don't like 60-40 in this spot. What specifically about this spot do you think? Alberto says the chance to get heads up, play more money. King 9 doesn't seem ahead enough for the time to risk 60% of my stack. Okay, so basically future stack sizes. What do you mean by this, Tim? The is 20% of hand? You mean it's in the like a top 20% of hands? Okay. So King 9 is top 20% of hands. I feel like I'm getting outplayed and not getting too many great spots. I'm more inclined to call. Okay. Outplayed and not getting many great spots. Oh, who wants, I'm confused. Who wanted to fold? So he likes his chip stack. Okay, he wants to fold. Okay, cool. And we win a race. We win race. We are huge chip leader. So, oh, that's interesting. So you know you're 57% now. So how about that? If you knew you were 57%, like it's set instead of King 9, you're dealt a piece of paper that says 57%. Because that's essentially, I guess, what this would be equivalent to. Is the small blind shoves a piece of paper that says 43%, and you call with a piece of paper that says 57%. Okay, so this kind of goes with the, you have 40K left if you lose. Whoa. Hold on. There we go. That's interesting. Thinking about the other guy. That's a great thing right there. Yeah, who's this other guy? And that's one thing that no program can ever detect, right? And that would imply future hands versus that guy, which we can estimate how those may play out based on past hands with that guy. So I think that's a great point, Tim. Like, who is the guy on the button? If it's Phil Ivey, time to call this hand with King 9 because you're going to need more ammunition to defeat Phil Ivey. If the guy on the button is a moron, you could be less inclined to call. Like, I think that's a great point you brought up. Okay, so anyway, of all these things, and there's probably more because we can go on forever about this, let's go through and look at which things that you said fall into each category. The categories being my two favorite things: common sense versus EV. Does small blind jam every button? I don't know. I'm not sure. That's a good thing to think about. Okay, so common sense versus EV. So let's go through these things and let's vote. Is it related to common sense or is it related to EV? So first one, we are ahead of his range. Common sense or EV? It's interesting. Wide variety of answers. I would say it's EV because when you think of ranges and pot odds and all those types of things, it's EV oriented. I'm ahead of his range. We still have 40K left when we lose. Basically, to clarify it, EV is stuff like a calculator could figure out or would be related to some type of calculation. Common sense is just human aspect. So we still have 40K if we lose, but if I call and lose, I can come back. Is that EV or common sense? Good. I guess you could say it's EV that, or sorry, common sense that you know his range, but I I guess if we stretch it, yeah, I suppose it's somewhere in there. Okay, so let's do this. Next one. If he's shoving 100 now, he'll shove 100 later. Common sense or EV? Good. Oops. No mega third place guy. Common sense or EV? Okay. King 9 is top 20% of hands. Common sense or EV? Oh, see, now we're getting a mixture. So it seems like Sander is always seeing these things that aren't exactly EV, but are related to EV as a both thing. Basically, let's define EV as like anything related to calculations, percentages, math, etc. And then common sense would be like everything else. Okay, EV. So I had to clarify, my fault. If I'm getting outplayed and not getting many great spots when we win the race, oh, sorry, that's two things. If I'm getting outplayed and not getting many spots, I'll be more likely to be called. Seems like common sense. When we win the race, we're a huge chip leader. Common sense. Now is a good time to win. It's a good time to gamble. Anti-common sense? I don't know. But I guess it doesn't really have to do with EV. If I can run them over, why call common sense? Don't like 60-40 in the spot. That would definitely be EV. And future stack sizes, common sense, etc. Okay. Yeah, well, okay. When, let's say maybe a synonym for common sense would be like logical. Like things that Sit and Go Wiz can't detect, or things that PokerStove can't detect. Like if you guys have seen like the CAPTCHA stuff, I don't know how to spell that. Is that it? You know, like when they bot test you, or whenever you sign up for something and they want to verify that you're not a computer program. Basically, common sense is like the CAPTCHA, right? So it's like only a human can detect it. No program, no matter how smart, can understand that stuff. So anyway. But what's interesting is the common sense, as you know, will always outweigh the EV. In this hand, what I see is I have 25 big blinds at 2K, 4K, and these blinds are rather small for this stage of the game. And I like that. Like, that suits me as a player. I want to be in this position. So for me personally, calling here is damaging to my future skill. And remember, I'm not waiting for a better spot. I'm anticipating better spots. So that's what I would fold here. But of course, it can vary from person to person. Maybe personally, some of you guys may hate having 25 big blinds. So, you know, you have to kind of play into your personality. You never want to take a spot like this just because it's good, or don't do it just because it's bad. But you want to also adapt your own personality to it. Sanders says, how many people in 180s know how to play 20 plus big blinds? Three-handed? Nah, decent amount, not very many. I don't know. Like, it's what's cool is when you have stacks, so much more becomes possible. And it's just, poker becomes poker instead of this just kind of not very many options. It's very one-dimensional. You shove, you fold, you do that over and over. Huyan saying, I mean, if you're saying that you know he's on ATC, right, and that's why I proposed the question. Oh, so you're saying it's irrelevant that we know he's on ATC. Oh, okay. Well, because that's what I'm trying to tempt you. Because it's a standard fold, like, with no information, but I'm trying to tempt you into wanting to call. My next temptation is, what if he shows you 7 deuce offsuit? Like, and I guess that could assume some different things. Like, is he always shoving ATC, or does he misclick shove? We don't know that. But what if he shows you 7 deuce offsuit here? And you know that you're, whatever it is, 60, 40, or maybe 65 or something like that. 68, 32, okay. if you know that you're a 2-1 favorite, do you call? Like, where is your personal line where you draw the line? You say, "Yeah, I call." Well, if show's 9-2, I call. But like, this is something that a lot of people struggle wrapping their heads around, is like hypothetical situations where you basically you can propose a temptation to someone and say, well, what would you do if this happened? Because when you think like that, you can learn a lot about how to play and about yourself as a player. And this is something that not a lot of people understand. Like, I used to do this where I pose the question to people, say, okay, you're in a typical 9-man ICM spot or whatever that ICM spot is. And and then you lay out some stacks where you can't call an all-in except if you have like Kings Plus, right? You guys have all heard of those spots, right? And so I'd say, okay, what's your calling range in this spot if you know the guy has Queen Deuce offsuit, right? And people say, oh, Kings Plus, I can't call, right? But the thing is if he has Queen Deuce, you can call him with like Queen 8, Queen 9, Queen 10, Queen Jack, then Kings and Aces, or something like that. Or like if a guy showed you 10 Deuce offsuit, call him with 10-9 offsuit. But then it's Kings if he shoves all those hands. But see, that's where sometimes when we learn ranges like that, because we go, oh well, if he's on all of these hands, then I can call a certain amount. But when we can give it a temptation, we go, well, what if he had, right? That's why I'm trying to draw your urges out. Like when I say, oh, well, what if he's on ATC? What if you know this? Or like, what if he's on a particular hand, And it's so interesting because people are so focused on the cards themselves. Like some guys have a personal bias. Like Wicked Souls, for example, calls this because King 9 to him is a call. And we actually found a psychological flaw in his game where he calls too wide with 4 specific hands. And we saw this over a pattern of multiple games over the span of a few weeks. King 6, King 7, King 8, King 9, he's in love with. I don't know why, but somewhere inside of him, like ingrained in him, he loves those hands. And so all the calling mistakes I see Wicked Souls make, King 6, King 7, King 8, King 9, that's not a coincidence. And this is like multiple hands over multiple games. Like, it's crazy. Let me read these other ones. You could argue that having 40 big blind stack has good future implications too. That's right. And that's one thing where I think I miss out on thinking about that stuff, where I'm like, well, I could call, and then what do I get? What's my common sense reward? Oh my God, I have 65K. That's amazing. Sanders says, so not when you know his hand. I mean, you could go either way. Like, basically, we're just trying to create situations to find out how we think about something. Like if we just said, hey, this guy has King 2. Okay, snap call. But like, let's pretend ICM said you can only call with Kings Plus here. I mean, it wouldn't, but if we pretend, a lot of guys would say, well, you can't call with King 9 because ICM says that's bad. So then we pose the question, well, what if he had? And then we fill in the blank. And we can really find out like how someone thinks. Because remember, as we said before, it's not the decisions you make, it's the way you think that leads you to those decisions. So Puyan says, it's interesting arguments either way, and a close decision. Sanders says, particular hands become a call. If you are up against this whole range and have to call queens versus every combination of hands that small blind can have, then you have to fold queens in that king spot. Yeah, I mean, and that's what's so weird about all that stuff. Like, all these rules that are set, and people try and obey all these rules, and they kind of get in the way sometimes. Like, you know how like when you're a kid, at least like for a lot of people, maybe it varies by culture. I don't know. Like, it's like you want to fit in, you want to be cool, and like kind of have friends and all that kind of stuff. And when you're young, people tell you to like, oh, you should be yourself. But when you're a kid, like all you want to do is like fit in. Yeah, and Dexter's a great example of that. And then I guess like as you get older, then you realize that it's not as important anymore, I guess, to like fit in the cool crowd. I don't know. At least that's what I learned. Um, anyway, so in this hand, like after all the things that we've discussed, has anyone changed their mind? Um, because I think like when you fold in a spot like this, I think this is an example of saving a spot and not missing it. Even if this is plus EV, and even if you are 57-43 versus ATC, I don't think this is missing a spot because it's a spot that we're selectively avoiding. Did anybody who called before change their mind? Oh no. Team viewer went out. And my computer is frozen. I'll set up another one. And I think the better you are, like guys like Tim, for instance, I think of all of us, I think Tim would lose the most by calling here because he is just ridiculously good post flop. And there's so much that he could do with this 25-26 big blind stack. Can you guys see again? He's like, yeah, I am good post flop. So Puyan says, in a vacuum, I'm folding, but with the info that he's on ATC, I'm calling still. I think you should take that into consideration, Tim. Like, and that's the thing. Should I take a plus EV spot when you know he's on ATC, like in our example, or do you wait for a better spot? But Tim, I don't think you would be waiting for a better spot. You're just anticipating them because you're like, I'm Tim. I'm really, really good. So I know that lots and lots of amazing things are going to happen for me. Because you go out of your way to invent those things. You know, it's not like you're just waiting for the good things to come around. You turn bad things that are normal, like, oh, I'm on the button with a bad hand. This is a typical fold. But then you turn it into value by raising it. So anyway. Being good heads up is far more important than being good post flop, even if heads up. Is this just run circles on itself? Isn't being really good heads up mean you're really good post flop? Aren't those like interchangeable? I mean, because everybody can be good at like shoving less than 10 big blinds. Like a monkey could do that. And heads up is about all the other things apart from that stuff. What do you think, Martin? Okay, be good at both things. And I guess stack depth also heads up and all that kind of stuff. The deeper you are, the greater your skill, because you have more room to work. Post flop, post turn, post river. Huh. Oh, so like you feel strong on the flop, and then as streets, I think turn and river are definitely the hardest streets to play. I think probably the turn is the hardest because on the river at least you know that's the final street. This is good advice by Chris. Like, wow, if you're really tight in future spots and like invention value type things and going after people, calling increases in value for you. Yeah, agree. Good comment. All right, let's check out the next hand here. Being chicken and weak or just avoiding. Okay, so hand 2 of 3, another Wicked Souls hand. This one we actually get to see the true action because I don't have to fake hands. So we are, I believe, well, there's 6 people at the table, so we're either like 11, 12, or 13 handed, possibly 14 maybe, in a 180 man $2 buy-in. Okay, so he's a tight semi-reg. Well, good. Yeah, right off the bat, call or fold. That's good. So you didn't even consider shove, which is, I think that's really, really good. Even though shove is plus EV, probably. So I guess you guys are answering my first question. What are you thinking about? Don't like pennies? Cool. Okay. Anything else? At least TeamViewer 7 is working right now. So he's okay with that for 16K. Yes, this is it's a 250, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to have weaker hands. And of course, like, we know he's going to have ace king and ace queen probably like 100% of the time. So if he has ace 10 and ace 9, then you're effectively break even versus those. 2 you beat, 2 you lose to. So if he shoves ace 8, ace 7, ace 6, etc., king queen, etc., then you start showing a profit. Yeah, he could be on any ace. Is this ace X suited or ace X is... Yeah, probably any ace. Very reasonable. 10 normal big blinds, and if he understands true big blinds, then he's probably shoving like, what is that, 8? 8 true big blinds. Yeah, we dominate a big part of his range, right? So basically, I chose this hand to share an idea. If you call, fold, good, either one. Shoving is okay too, but totally decreases in value because of the risk of being called by him. So 2 things are very important to me in this hand. The first thing is your chips in this stage of game. Okay. How common is it that you have 50K with 12, 13 people left? Yeah. Rare for you, rare for me too. I'll tell you, in the last 11 months, it's happened to me precisely 0 times. So you're saying like 60% of the time on the last 2 tables at this stage of game. Oh, am I sensing Skype sarcasm? What's going on? I just see a winky face. I mean, overall, it's pretty rare. Like, when you're at this point, your average stack, like, not of the game, but that you usually have here, you're around, like, what? 10K, 20K is, like, completely normal. So I think that's one consideration that should be considered here. That was poor English. A consideration that has to be considered. Awesome. Thank you, college. So he says, but we can make a question. How often do we have 70K on a 1-2 level? Very good question, because you could call here, right, and bump up to like 70K when you add in the overlay from the pot. And then that's pretty rare too. Would it matter if we go to 33K on a blind level 1-2? No, that's good. So that's really good. That's a great common sense thing to think about here. Like, if you lose, you're down to 33, and if it goes up to 1K, 2K, hey, that's great, you know? And also, why me would say, hey, he has 3 full lives here because he has 30 big blinds, so he should call, you know, and that's great too. Notice how the decisions are based off of common sense and creative thinking processes that lead to your decision, not just this is plus EV, I'll do it. So Sandra throws in good reshove stack and good steal stack if we win if you lose, and then if we win, great bully stack. Yeah, right. So here's the second thing that I'm thinking of here. What blind level? So basically the blind level in this stage of game. There's 11, 12, 13, 14 people left. What's the most common big blind level or levels that occur at this stage of game? And this is just something you guys should all know based off of experience. No one's ever taught you this. It should just be an observation. So we're getting a 500, 1,000. We're getting a 1,200 to 2,000. Anybody else? Opinions? 1K seems a bit small for what's normal. And this is something like no one's really going to teach this. This is just something the more you'll play, the more you'll recognize what's normal. Right now, the most common is probably somewhere around 2K. Usually, like for example, like just from experience, like when you barely crack into the money, it's usually like big blind 1,200, usually somewhere around there. And then like as like you kind of move through this 2 tables left stage of game, it's like 16 and it goes to 2. And usually the highest it gets is 3. When you're about like 10, 11 handed, it's usually like 2K or 3K. And sometimes it's 1,600. Same can be done in a 45-man. Like when you reach a final table in a 45-man, the most common blind level is usually about big blind 800. And then sometimes it gets to big blind 1,200. And then you're like, whoa, these blinds are big. And that's the point I want to get at, is based on the blind level and the stage of game, what this equals when you add those two things together is basically, I don't know the best way to word this, a preview for what's to come. And also it kind of gives you a clue into how you should consider playing. Because if you're at a blind level that seems too big, have you guys ever been in a situation where you're like, oh my god, the blinds are huge right now. What is this? I'm in a 45-man final table. It's big blind 2K and there's 7 people left. What is going on? How could this be happening? This is rigged. Now it's just a luck fest. Or whatever they call it. Yeah. Right. Like 3K, 6K? There's 10 people left. What is going on? This is crazy. Right? And the reason why that happened is because just throughout the course of the game, people acted maybe a little slower than normal, or the most common thing is just people wouldn't lose, and so now you've been playing this game for longer and longer, and there's still a lot of people left. And instead of thinking like, oh, it's a luck fest, what it means is that you should just be more liberal overall. The blinds are way too big for right now. Okay, fine. That guy shoves, I'll call. I don't care as much because the game is getting out of control. I need chips. But then when I get in a situation that's just the opposite, that's like this, oh my god, like 13 people left. The normal blind at this point is like 2K, maybe 3K. You're early right now. What if this, let's just pretend, what if this was big blind 1,000 with 13 people left, and this guy was shoving still 10 big blinds for 10,000 chips? it totally changes meaning even more because you're way early. And the earlier you are in something, that suggests that you have a lot more time, so you can be more patient and more selective. Yes, you would still have the same exact stack size. We would just pretend that he's shoving 10K at big blind 1K. And then you could also argue for that. You say, well, I have 50 big blinds, so I can call a little looser, right? So you basically, you can take all those different things in your decision process that will lead you to the actual physical decision you make. But I just find this concept really interesting of using the blind level combined with the stage of game to basically become a psychic and anticipate what's going to happen in this game, right? Because think about it. If you're ever in a game, if you were this game and it was big blind 3K right now, if it's big blind 3K now, what's it going to be like when there's 7 people in the game? What's it going to be like when there's 3 people in the game? It's craziness. You can almost anticipate that when your head's up, it's going to be like big blind 10K or like 6,000, 12,000. Crapshoot. Yes, that's the word I couldn't think of. Whenever you're in a game where you're, oh, this is a crapshoot, it's just an indication that, guess what, you're late. You should have been here earlier, but you're not. There's too many people left and the blinds are huge, so you should be way more liberal. Jesse's probably still eating. Yeah. So that's what's really interesting. But then when the opposite, whatever we call the opposite of a crapshoot, where the stacks are deeper and you have more time, you can be more selective. So this may sound really silly to a lot of people. And again, I don't care if you call this here, because I think if you're calling, you're not missing a spot. But I would fold here and save a spot because this is early. And blind levels are 5 minutes, right? Let's pretend that the normal blind level here is like 2K. So I have like a 5-minute head start on this game. What if it was big blind 1000 here? So then I have the 5 minutes of big blind 1200, the 5 minutes of big blind 1600, and any excess time from big blind 2000. So maybe I have 11 or 12 minutes of a head start in this game. I have time, right? But that's what's really important, because no program and no EV calculation could ever detect this, ever. You're the only person who can, and you just do it through experience. The more you play, you go, certain stages of game are usually accompanied by a pretty standard blind level. So then when you arrive at that stage of game early, or you arrive at it late, you could adjust your strategy. Does that all make sense? Questions, comments, anything? Basically, we're just taking like a strategic point of view for a hand like this, instead of just saying, okay, I know he's on a certain range, it's probably ace-x, yeah, I'm going to call. And calling would be great, and way better than shoving, by the way, which some of you said. But it's just an interesting thing that is something that can help you a lot with your decisions. So Chris throws a buttload out. Let's read this. It's a paradox that all of those truths can lead us to different decisions. Right. Yeah, very true. For example, we have a lot of time, so call, and we have a lot of time to come back. So fold, because we can find other less risky spots. Right. So it's like you can think the same thing, but it can lead you to different answers depending on how you interpret that. Or are we able to use our chips to make more chips? Yeah. So fold and use your stack. Yes. So call to have a bigger stack and then crush the table. No, you should just call. Right. So this is really interesting. It is a paradox. It's the perfect word. It's the idea that you could think of the same thing, the same cool thinking process, but it can lead you to a different decision. It's the interpretation of the information. Sandy asks, what would be your cutoff for calling and then having to call the bigger stacks reshove? Wow. Like, I was talking to Wicked Souls about this in game, and I was telling him, I never actually did this when I played, but now, after just like all the talking to a bunch of you guys and the other guys who've been part of the site and just learning a lot from discussing things with people, don't laugh or LOL too hard. I think I want to fold ace king here. And that sounds like absurd and stupid. But I almost just don't want to risk my stack at all. Like, I just love it so much that I don't want to do it. But the moment you put me in a situation where maybe there's a lot more good players and I need chips, I'd be more willing to do it. Because they're going to play better overall. So I would need more ammunition versus them. But to directly answer this question, to call and then to want to call the big stack, probably Queen's Plus. Sanders says we rarely call the big stacks because we won't call with jacks, so I would go with never. Yeah, and that's interesting. Like, maybe it's King's Plus here even. So you're saying, like, you're saying just open fold ace king? I think it should vary, like, player to player. Like, I think the more feel you have in a situation, the more you should fold. But I don't think calling is bad at all. I mean, it's just an idea, and it's a very different idea, like, to fold ace king here, because, like, how normal is it to, it's ace king. Like, what are you waiting for, Matt? You could ISO shove jacks. I mean, it's not bad at all. I just wonder, like, if then that guy called next to you, then what? Andy says, I was just curious, is this much more towards a fold than a call? Because call folding with such a nice stack would be horrible. Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think it's better to call and then not be screwed versus the small blind, like to call and fold, than it would be to shove and still be screwed just the same. Because for the most part, usually, any hand that the small blind would reshove over you here would be the exact same hand as his calling range if you just shoved. For the most part. There may be some variation across different players and stuff. But basically by calling, which would be way better than shoving here, you're saving yourself. Casper says if he's doing it with 5%, why not call fold? Exactly. Because then when you shove here, even though 95% of the time the small blind goes away, there's still that 5% of the time when you're screwed. And if you can drop that down to 0%, that would be awesome. So we can see what happened here. So he calls, which is way better than shoving, and I think it's fine. Yay! I don't even know what the result is, actually. No! That's a split. That's rigged. Okay, last hand. This is the shortest one of all of them. So I'm sure you guys recognize the big blind, a very talented player. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, though. So this is about how to miss a spot correctly. What should you do here? Okay, we get a limp stab. Limp stab, raise, fold, or shove, right? Or fold. He's he's very good, actually, I think, right? Working under the impression that he's pretty good. I still remember what his avatar looks like after a year of never seeing him, so I would assume that he's like made an impression on me in the past if I can remember his avatar. Okay. So this is like the difference between saving and missing a spot here is like shoving is great. So if you do a play like this, is this considered missing a spot, or is this considered missing it on purpose and replacing it with a better thing? Okay. So Morton says, well, limping could backfire if he shoves everything. Right, which, what would you guys do, really quick, what would you guys do with ace-king here? So see right away, oh, we're getting multiple things here. Interesting. Yeah, so before we continue that, limp sometimes raise, sometimes right. Right. We're getting a lot of limps here, which is interesting. And if that's the case, so one great way to learn and to think about things you should do is to ask yourself a hypothetical question. Like, if you have a bad hand now, ask yourself what you would do with a good hand. And usually, that whatever you do with the good hand, you should do something else with a bad hand. So immediately, if you guys are saying limp with ace-king, obviously it's because you're trying to trap him. So then limping with 9-7 would backfire because you would do that with ace-king. Fluffy Killer would shove ace-king, totally fine too. How can we say that that's bad? Oh, you shove ace-king blind versus blind. No, it's great. Why not do the same with your bad hands? Well, there's no reason to merge your range against someone who can't see it. I think that's something that a lot of people think about, that you should always merge your range so people don't catch on, but if they don't know, then it really doesn't matter. I always use that example. I probably use it on at least half of you guys here. Say, how many fingers am I holding up? Anybody want to guess? And the answer, as usual, is none, because you can't see me. You know, and so basically the moral is, if he can't see you, then there's no reason to merge your range. So until there's some reason to merge your range, you are running bad and guessing. Always. If there's no reason to merge your range, then you should just try and do what you think is best for the hole cards that you have. And then if maybe down the line, let's just say all of a sudden a relationship develops between you two and there's like this metagame, sure, then you can start considering merging. And that's a great point too. Puyon says he can't, yeah, but he can see you fold, Sanders says, and Puyon says, well, be careful what you assume, because 30 tablers probably won't notice. And that's a great point, because a lot of guys stack, and when you fold, the table never pops up. You know what's interesting? I've experienced this with several guys where they say, I don't like to raise small because I always get reshoved on. Then I ask them, do you stack your tables? And they say yes. And I say, hey, well, guess what? When you get reshoved on, your table pops back up. And when you don't get reshoved on, your table does not pop back up. So they only see the bad and never see the good. You know, and like things like that, they make an impression on you over time. Anyway. No, you won't say zero, because next time I'll use metagame and I'll put up fingers. Duh. Warren says, this spot also depends on stage of game. Right. What's a normal stage of game for this blind level? Like 25-handed? Somewhere around there, maybe? Before bubble? Yeah, like the third table before bubble. But see how you guys can detect that from just when the blind level is and maybe how many people are at the table? Like, and that's why the whole blind level plus stage of game trick is really helpful. This is normal right now, right? You guys know all this stuff. Let's see, what else? Tim says, people can actually notice. I mean, I'm not the best multi-tabler, but I notice a lot. Yeah, okay, see, that's really good. So Tim's smarter than the average bear. That was cliche. So he notices stuff like that. And that's really good. A lot of people don't pick up on that kind of stuff. Really, really good observation. Oh, shoot. Is this last two tables? Oh, you're right. Look at the bigger stacks than normal. Holy cow. So look how early this game is. What does that mean? You're like 16, 15-handed? At big blind 1K? Oh, you're early. Huh. Very interesting. Wow. Wow. See? So now the timing of the stage of gaming completely changes. Now you're way early instead of just like right on track. Tim says, I think we got to semi-decide whether his reshove range is going to be near the same as his shoving range if we limbed. Yeah, that's a good point. Is he shoving here and exploiting? Stuff like that. Like, when you don't know anything, I would work under the assumption that he's not reshoving as much as he should. However, some people did say that he was really good in MTTs, so I bet a really good player who's predisposed to good MTT strategy would probably reshove more than the average 180 player, because MTTs there's much more reshoving. Just like if Buffy Slayer played 180s, he'd probably reshove more than a lot of other good players because he's used to it. And he says, is he likely to be tighter then, or will his game remain the same? Yeah. And until we know any of that information, we can either take a spot by shoving, we could miss a spot on purpose, basically, and decide to do something else. It's up to you. Sanders says his stack is not ahead of the time schedule, so he's probably on his regular game. Huh. That's a pretty normal stack size right now. Yeah. So anyway, I think this is an okay spot to basically take a good spot and then change it into something better. But then perhaps if you thought he was going to reshove a lot here, then you shove to just prevent him from doing that. Or if you think he's going to shove a lot over your limbs, you shove to prevent that. Basically, we should never give a walk here until someone earns it. The best example I have of this would be like, think about it in baseball, and it's cool because they actually call it a walk. When a pitcher intentionally walks a batter, they only do it at really, really rare times, when it's a strategic reason why they should intentionally walk someone. Right, because he's like a really good hitter, but not only that, it's at a really important part of the game. Because pitchers will still pitch to good hitters, but when it reaches a special part of the game where they think they have to, they will make a strategy adjustment and walk him on purpose. And the thing is, you think about it in baseball, if we translated it into EV or negative EV, when you walk someone, you're putting someone on base on purpose. That sounds very negative EV to me. But there's a precise reason why the coach of a team would decide to do that. And it's rare, but it happens. But you should really never intentionally walk a person here unless you have the best freaking excuse. Like if it's a strategic fold. A great example would be like he reshoves on you like mad crazy if you raise here. He will shove like over your limbs all day long, and he'll call you perfectly if you shove. So you have no other choice but now to just fold some bad hands. But like 99.9% of the time, that never happens, and we just usually shouldn't give walks here ever, unless your internet goes out like me or something like that. For him to reshove to make it unprofitable, let's see, you are risking 2,200 minus 500, which is 1,700. So you're risking 1,700 to win 2,200. So we take the risk, which is 1,700, and we turn it into 1. So 2,200 divided by 1,700 is 1.29. So basically you're risking 1 to win 1.29. What do you do? 1 divided by 1.29? That's backwards, right? Did I do that wrong? No. I think then so what you do, you add those together. 1, like that. Yeah, there you go. So basically, he has to reshove on you. You have to be successful 43% of the time, so he has to reshove on you 57% to exploit you. Not 57% of hands, just 57% of the time. How to make this easy instead of annoying math? Anytime you risk 1 to win 1, you have to be right half the time. So if you risk 2,200 here, which would be if you raise to 2,700 because your 500 is already out there. So if you risk less than 1, then it just means he has to reshove greater than 50% of the time. That's what you should take away from this. Forget about all the math. So basically, he would have to reshove like Jack 6 offsuit here to exploit you. And he's probably not doing that. So in the meantime, raise, 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 raise. Andy said, if he's reshove crazy or calls light, what hands would you play and how? If he reshoves light, like really crazy light, like if he actually was shoving and exploiting us with Jack 6, then I would start raise calling hands like Ace High and like King 10 and stuff like that. Hands that we would normally just shove for value or I don't know, because it's super profitable. And maybe even raise call like Queen Jack suited. And then and then also our good hands. Basically, you just raise call wider, but not like psycho wider, but just a little bit wider. Yeah, you start inducing wider, right? Because if he gets like gross wide, then you can start getting a little wider in your calls. And then if, say there was a hand like King 10, but then you weren't comfortable raise calling it, then just shove and block him from reshoving. Even though raising to induce with King 10 may be more profitable than shoving, if it feels uncomfortable for you, don't do it. So Andy adds more or less what you'd call if you were in the big blind calling rig. Not so much. I wouldn't simplify it to that, but I would say do it with a range that's a little bit wider than normal, but still a range that is comfortable to you personally. Because you don't want to feel uncomfortable when you're raise calling. When you raise call, you want to be happy about it. So that's how you can find the perfect range for you. Just ask yourself, does this make me feel good? And if it doesn't, then, like for example, if you had King 8 and you were like, oh, I think I could raise call here, but that feels gross, then just shove so you don't have to put yourself in that spot. Yeah, so this is another one of those short webinars. Yo, guys, who knows how to work with Camtasia? So anyway, I think that's a good ending. Thanks, Pedro. That's good. So he raises big blind folds. My dog makes a sound in the background, and that's all she wrote. I think we're way over 24 hours. Okay, so copy that. Cool. So let me close this out.